talk to you a little bit about this presentation I've made before. In fact, this is the fourth time I've done it. I guess the first time was maybe 15 years ago, called Reading the Director's Mind. And there's some parts of it that are particularly oriented to people who may be doing their first thing on stage. So those of you who are old veterans will hear a little bit of stuff that you know very well. But then I'll give you my take on a few things, and hopefully you get some good things out of it. I don't think it'll take the whole evening, so we should have some time left over at the end. Boy, excuse me. To do some readings. And then we're coming up on a time when we're going to be able to do, go back at some of the stuff we've already done before and read those things again so people can get a better feel for what they might want to do in performance. So, but I did bring a couple of things tonight, and Penny brought in a couple of things. I don't know whether you guys did tonight, but okay. And we'll kind of see where we go from there. Just a reminder that in mid-April, by April 11th, I think it is when we want to decide on what we're going to do. And so you should be keeping track of what items that we go through that you might be interested in, or if you've missed some of them, you look at it online. You should have the link to the folder. Hopefully everybody has that link so that you can get to the scripts. We're putting them all out there. And then there's the survey that you can start to fill out, which you can fill out as you go along, or because you can edit it any number of times. You can go back and change your mind. Say, oh, I decided this, I want to do this, want to do this. Change things, but sometimes it helps to do it as you go along, just so that you haven't been too far away from it. And then we'll start breaking it up to what we're actually going to try to perform. So before I get started, any questions about logistics or problems or what we're doing here? Okay. What are we doing? I'm sure we'll figure it out eventually, probably by about August. One of the things that I'll be asking you on the survey is what you might be interested in directing. Now, but you might not have thought of directing before, and you don't have to, obviously. It's strictly something that is just an opportunity for, in this workshop format, for people that haven't directed to get a chance to do that. And it's a good opportunity because you can pick something that's relatively short, try to get your feet wet and say, you know, is this really something that speaks to me or not? It's certainly how I got started, and maybe some of the others did. Okay, all of us got started from the drama workshop, because it's easier to do that than just jump right into a full-length production, and certainly into a full-length musical. Musicals are about 3 times harder to do than straight shows, because you've got 3 times the coordination between your music director and your choreographer and the director. You've got to pull so much more together, and additional logistics technically, typically. An awful lot of drama pieces are, you know, when you start, you turn the lights up, and you're done, you take the lights down. And so they tend to be a little easier on that too. And directing is kind of fun, because in a sense you get to act all the parts, not in the detail of acting, but in the sense of looking at the overview of it and trying to pull together what the whole piece as a whole is about. And then as you direct,
You get to tell people where to go.
you do, and honestly, what we're going to talk about tonight is a little the opposite of that, is what you don't have to tell them. because part of what we're going to talk about is, in reading the director's mind, is the things he doesn't need to say to you. Hopefully that the actors bring a knowledge and a sense of doing things without having to be told. But in addition to that, there's an aspect, as I've often told people, that as we get into it, the actors get to know their characters better than the director knows them. The director knows this overview stuff, but because the actor is focused on just their own character, they get a lot of insight. Not only do they bring insights and nuances that are beyond the, move your hand a little more this way, or when you hear this word, do this, but in addition, there is just the sense that they start to understand their character. And I've had characters say to me, this doesn't seem like what my character would say. And as a director, I listen to that a lot because I appreciate their insights into that character. Very early on, I had a character that, in fact, the actor changed my mind totally about how that character was feeling about what they were going through in the progression of the show because of their insights into what the character was about. So that's part of it too. And of course, when all is said and done, the director can't tell every actor everything they should be doing. It's just too much. So that's where we rely on this idea of reading the director's mind somewhat and understanding it. So, but we're going to start with some very basic things, things that many of you might know, but if you haven't done much on stage, maybe you don't know. So the starting point is some basic stage things like stage left and stage right. When the director says stage left, he means from the actor's viewpoint. By the way, that's one of the things directors have to learn, is how to say left when you mean right and right when you mean left. Every time you start to say left or right, you think, am I saying the right thing? Because the natural thing as you're looking at it is to say, move a little to the left. No, to your right, my left. So part of that is getting that going. So stage left, stage right, and upstage and downstage. And many of you have heard this before. Why is that upstage? Yes?
Stages used to be slanted, so
Yes.
right.
Right. So the stages used to actually be, the audience was flat and the stage was at an angle. And so upstage, back here was actually literally higher than downstage. So if you're ever having trouble remembering it, knowing where it comes from really kind of helps. That also means if I say move below the table, well, by below I mean downstage of it. So above it, it would be upstage of it. So those are things that that by and large most people learn very quickly when they're doing it.
Randy,
Yeah.
you might want to comment here the difference between the stage direction upstage versus actors upstage, downstage.
Well, we'll get to upstaging actors, yes, in a bit. Yeah, we'll talk a little more about that. But yes, and this gets into the starting point of part of what you're trying to set up as a director, with some exceptions, is for the actors to be seen well and their facial expressions and their lips to be seen well by the audience. Number one, it actually helps the audience understand the words better. If there's something that's slightly mumbled, the lips help give it away a little bit, help reinforce what they're hearing. So if they miss something, they pick up on it a little bit. But also, of course, the facial expressions carry so much weight and so much of what's going on. There's a big difference between my saying, I didn't want to go to the party. I didn't want to go to the party. And saying, I didn't want to go to the party. Or even saying,
I didn't.
I didn't want to go to that party. A sense of the difference between telling the truth, telling a lie, or maybe even regret. All of those might be in that same line, but are telegraphed by your facial expression, so you want the audience to see it. So if I have someone, may I use you as a prop for a moment? Come up here and just stand next to me. So if I'm talking to this person, I want this person to know what I'm saying, but I also want the last person on the row over there to know I can't be facing them directly like this because they're not going to see me. So we do what's called cheating, which is you turn out a little bit. And now when I'm talking to you, these people are still seeing me in profile. So they see my expressions more. Now if I want to say something that I don't want her to know, but I want the audience to know, now I bring it down like this and talk to her over my shoulder a bit, but I can then tell the audience that I'm lying or that I'm upset about what I'm saying without her knowing it, because they can see she can't see it, but yet all the audience can see it. All right. So that works a lot of times when you're dealing with two people on stage. I meant to do one person on stage earlier. We'll go back and pick that up. That's a little easier. But when there's two people on stage, you'll tend to turn 3/4 out or 3/4 away so that the audience can see your expressions as you're talking to each other. Now that varies a bit depending on where your audience is. Right now, my audience, you folks that are here, are in this section over here. Okay. So if I want that person over there to see me, I'm going to have to turn reasonably far out. If we're farther upstage, come off stage with me, now that narrows that band of what has to be seen. So we can face each other almost dead on, and almost everybody is at best seeing me, at least seeing me in profile. On the other hand, if we happen to be way down here, now, even if I'm totally sideways, everybody's seeing my profile, but they're not seeing hers. So now what we do is, she's upstage of me a little bit, I can be like this, and now our 3/4 is more on the line like this. That is the line between us, if you're into geometry, is perpendicular to the majority of the audience. All right. So if we're over here, we can be talking like this, and if I'm over there, it would be just the opposite, so that people can see. The director will just say, okay, I need you stage right. Okay, we come over to stage right, but when we talk to each other, we know that the furthest person over can be much more in profile, and this person has to be much less in profile, and in order for people to see it. Okay, thank you. Now, if you add a third person to it, obviously one of you is going to be in the center, and so, but it's still that same little arc sense that you're doing. If it's a monologue, then obviously it's the same sort of thing, it's just you don't have the other person. So, I mean, a lot of monologues are either given to the world or given directly to the audience, depending upon whether you're presentational or representational, as it's called. Representation, you're representing real life, so you're not looking at anyone. Presentational, you're talking to the audience directly. And some monologues are one and some the other, depending upon what you're trying to accomplish. But in any case, if you park and bark, as they call it in opera, if you stand in one place and just delivering without moving around much, and sometimes you have to because you're in a spotlight, perhaps, so that really limits you. But it's pretty easy for everybody to see me here. But again, if I'm pacing or something like that, if I have something important to say and I'm pacing over this way, I might want to stop for a second or find some excuse to turn out so that the far people over there don't lose it. Once I get over here, I'm going to tend to, again, point towards the majority of the folks. So all of those are variations on that same theme.
Randy,
Yeah,
I missed it. Could you repeat which is presentational and which is representational?
representational is when you represent real life. So you ignore the audience, you are trying to act to some degree in the way you would act to a person, or even in a soliloquy or a monologue. You are talking to as though you were talking in a fog, or talking to God, or talking to, something like that. Presentational is where you very much make the audience a part of what you're doing. So like when we did the Mystery of Edwin Drood, and the chairman says, oh, I see, this is what we have sitting here tonight. All these people, that's the presentational form.
Okay, thanks.
Randy?
Yeah.
Can I interject one thing?
Sure.
So we're talking about opening up and angling for when you're upstage versus downstage. One of the things as an actor to consider, when your feet are closer together and more parallel, your body has less directional movement. If you're going to be facing the same way, you can leave your feet planted parallel or closer together. If you are going to need to be turning out at various different times during what you're doing, you should either spread your feet a little wider or angle your feet outward a little, and it gives you more turn at the waist to allow you to change that direction and focus without having to shift your whole body or shift your feet. One of the things that can get distracting is when you move your feet, it draws attention to your feet moving, not from your, most people want to look from the waist up and see what you're doing. So you want to give yourself the flexibility of being able to adjust your body from the waist up. And so when you need to move, spread your feet out a little bit or separate them a little bit more. When you're going to be positioned and you're going to be staying still, you can put your feet closer together and parallel.
Yeah. And that's particularly true in a venue like this, where people can see my feet well. The reality of the rec center, where we often perform, is that almost no one can see you below the waist.
But they can hear when you move your feet.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
That's true.
Those stage panels will echo. So.
That's true, and so that's still a good point, even there. Although, as I say, when you're dealing with choreographers, one of the things I tell them, if we're performing in the rec center, is you only have to choreograph from the waist up. People will screw it up their feet. Nobody's going to notice by and large. Yeah. Now, that also brings up if you got to move upstage. Again, and all of this is unless the director has directed you otherwise. By and large, you don't want to do that, because unless you're quiet or don't have anything to telegraph when you're doing it, if that's fine, that's fine. But if you're talking, if I'm talking about something and I turn up here, now obviously that's the ultimate in not being able to see your face. So sometimes if you need to move upstage while you're talking, you'll just turn to one side and find reasons to actually backpedal upstage. You have to do it in such a way that it doesn't look awkward, obviously. But you can work your way upstage in many cases without ever having to turn around. And if you're dealing with another person again, it's sometimes if they're upstage of you, then it becomes easier to take a step towards them and find reasons to turn to work yourself upstage rather than having to do a complete turn away. Yeah.
Just adding to what Ted said, coming from other backgrounds of mine, is that normally people don't stand with their feet parallel and evenly balanced. So as an actor, if you're trying not to represent a soldier in parade rest, if you stand differently in a way that's more mobile, or your weight's not evenly balanced on each foot, you will look more like a real person. And less like an actor who's got some part to play. I mean, like the 2 feet into each other.
So I said, this was rule of thumb, the things that you are going to do in general, unless there's some reason that a director is giving you to do otherwise. And I've, at times, for example, had people turn directly upstage. I had one show in which someone was starting to attack somebody, and I wanted the audience to feel being the victim. So I purposely had them turning upstage and backing up as the person came towards them, so that the audience got that feel. But of course, when you do, you better enunciate well, because now you're really pointing away. And depending on your venue as to how live it is, how bright, how well things, voices carry and so forth, you might have to do double the projection. Of course, projecting is one of the acting skills that you want to work into. And yes, you can project even if you're supposed to be talking quietly.
Yes, you can.
Yes. That's where stage whisper comes from, right? You make your voice breathier as you talk to someone, because you're supposed to be saying something that nobody else hears, but the people at the back of the room have to hear it. So by just adding that breathiness, you give the feel of it being quieter, and yet still can get your voice across to the back of the room. All right.
Back
Oh.
when we first started having these workshops,
I'm sorry, what?
back when we first started having these workshops, what I was doing was teaching people to project and to enunciate.
Yes. Well, that's always an important part. And there's nothing more disappointing than going to a show and it seems to be a really good show, but you're having trouble following the words. And that's also one of the most difficult parts about the videos we've made, is the videos are only as good as the audio, and audio is awfully hard to get really good at times. The best audio we've been able to get sometimes is when we've had body mics, and I've actually been able to take a feed off the soundboard. Indeed, when we did Beauty and the Beast, it was kind of fun because I had one track off the soundboard that was all the body mics that were up at any one time, and one feed that was the orchestra. And then I had all the camera feeds. And so during dialogue, during times when there was audience response, I'd have the sound up from the off the cameras, so you got the audience reaction, all that. But when it went into a song, I was able to drop out the camcorders and just do almost like a studio recording of just the voices and the
Orchestra.
orchestra. That turned out really nice. Oh, countercross. That was the other thing I wanted to mention. One more time, if you would. All right, so here we are. We're talking, the two of us. We're in 3/4. And then the director might say, okay, I want you, Randy, to cross below her. So I have some reason to do this. The natural thing then for you to do is to come around like this, and that's a countercross. And you'll find that happens a lot, particularly if in a few minutes I have to talk to someone over here, but I've been over here. And one of the things you do as a director early on is you figure out that blocking and what places you need to have something like that happen. Because in a minute I've got to talk to someone that's over there, but I have to tell them something that she can't hear. So I give some reason to, he has some reason to cross here, you address the stage here, he finishes talking to you, and they can do the aside over here. So those are some of the things you start looking for as you do blocking. And let me tell you, one of the things a director needs more than anything else is a good eraser. I'll tell you, as you work through the blocking of scenes, a lot of times you go, I just can't get there from there. I got to go way back and undo lots of what I did and try this again because I've got to get people in new places. I won't tell you how many times I blocked the dinner scene in A Little Night Music to get the dinner time start up, because it starts with this totally mute time. It's all in pantomime, and yet you had to get people looking at the right place at the right time, which is another problem that stage directors have. You might have some, that stage directors have that movie directors and television directors don't. The movie can make you look at what it wants you to look at. On stage, we have to do that with something that draws attention, draws focus. So a lot of what you're doing is trying to get people to look at the place you want them to look at various times.
Is that Randy?
Yeah.
Bringing that comment back to the theme of this is that when you're an actor, you have to be very careful to not draw focus unless you are supposed to be the focus.
Yeah, you're just 3 lines ahead of me.
Okay.
Okay, let me go back and pick up one thing that you did mention earlier, and that's upstaging. When there's 2 of you on stage, or more, any number of people on stage, some people are going to be up, and others farther down at times. If there's 2 of you and you're talking like we just were, that's fine. I am going to get you up and down all night tonight. That's all right. So if we're talking like this, and again, we're turned down a little bit, so go ahead and turn out just a little more. And you don't have to be quite that far. You're just making sure that she sees you in profile. So that's sufficient. If we're talking like this, that's good enough. We can see each other, and it still looks like we're talking together. Fairly natural, and just like the audience pays no attention to those lights in the ceiling, they don't pay attention to the fact that this is a little bit of an artifice. But what you don't want to do is, if I stand up here, now I force her to look at me. And the more I go above her, the more it is that others can't see her. And usually that's a bad thing. That's called upstaging someone, because divas and other divas of any gender in the past would draw attention to themselves at the expense of other actors by purposely being upstaging them. Again, there might be times you want to do that if the director directs you to it, but in general that's not a good thing to do. And of course the worst, just as bad, is upstaging yourself. If you end up being down too far, now I've got to turn up here, and now those folks are losing me. So you tend to try to stay on those lines, and of course, again, as we go farther over, the lines move a little bit as to where they are. So when we're over to this side, she can actually be upstage with me because all my audience is over that way. Okay, thank you. See, this will teach you never to sit in the front row. So how do we get people to look where we want them to? Well, one of the ways is by where everybody's looking. If suddenly there's something about to happen, or something does happen, that we want to make sure the audience sees, you might just, the director might have everybody else look at that person. If everybody's looking over that way, the audience naturally, what are they looking at? You know, it's like standing outside the building and looking up, and everybody's, what is he looking at? So we might direct them there with our eyes. You might direct them there with props even. If I point my guns over this way, again, people are going to be tending to look in that direction. So at times we can move people's eyes around for the good, using our eyes and our props. It can also be for the bad. If everybody is on stage and somebody's bored over here and they're going, or anybody that notices them is going to say, well, what are they looking at? And that can draw focus away from what's going on. That means that when action is occurring and you are supportive but not a part of the action, what should you do? How do you dress the stage in a way that complements what the storyline is? If you get fidgety, if you start reacting too large, you're going to draw focus because our eyes are drawn to what changes. We learned that from the animals. When suddenly something moves, we look at it because it could be a predator. And it's still true today. When someone just got up back there and my eyes immediately jumped up to him, you know. Our eyes, and more exactly our brains, work to pick up on what changes. So if someone's talking down here and I'm not the center of the action, in general I want to keep my motions pretty small. If I make them big, I draw them to me and away from what they should be paying attention to. But at the same time, if somebody glances at me, I don't want to be looking bored or, you know, not paying attention, again, unless that's the purpose of the thing. So most of the time, what you want to do is act in the way your character would act and react to what's going on, but in the small. You want to, oh, that's something surprising. Not, you know, but instead it's keep your actions small so that if someone looks at you, you look like you're a natural part of what's going on, but it doesn't draw the focus to you until there's a time to do that. So you keep it small, or as one wag once said, don't just do something, stand there. Sometimes just standing there is fine. And as long as when people look at you, you look like you're a part of what's going on and correct for your character, you don't have to do a lot of motion. And you don't have to worry about it being repetitive because people aren't paying, hopefully, aren't just watching you. You know, maybe your mother is because she's there, but in general, people are paying attention to what they're supposed to. So even if what you're doing is a bit repetitive, they don't notice it. All right, so even if it feels kind of awkward to you, it's not as obvious to the audience as long as it's appropriate to what's going on. So you try to keep that reaction by and large small. Now, again, there are exceptions in this one I was just talking about earlier where we had the pantomime going on. There were little vignettes of things that happened. And so we had to draw focus somehow to the right next thing. And there was one thing that happened way over on the far stage right. And then the next thing that happened was going to be way over here. And what was going to happen is Mike Marshall was going to walk away and get a glass from a waiter and take it to his wife. And I was thinking, gee, people are going to miss that shtick. And it was meant to very much parallel what had just happened with Carl Magnus doing the same thing on the other side of the stage, getting his wife a drink. So I said, I know how to do it. When Mike walked across the stage, he got the waiter's attention. Now you get big motion, all of a sudden, that pulls people's attention to what's going on. And conversely, the people that had to give up attention needed to get their actions in the small at that point, so that they weren't doing much. He gave the drink to his wife, and then I said, just mind like you're having a conversation. You're not paying attention to this, so I couldn't have them look at it. It wasn't for them to see, but I could do it by having them just have a conversation in the small that didn't draw attention next to the action that was happening there. So some of this, I'm telling you, is director's planning, but some of it the actors can bring to it naturally as a part of what they're doing, so the director doesn't have to tell each and every, okay, you should be doing more of this. Again, if the director needs you to do something more, they'll let you know. But in general, you want to keep your reactions, when action is going on elsewhere, small. And certainly that's the case if it's something you're not supposed to see. So your eyes you have to somehow get yourself in a position so that it's not right in your viewpoint where you could obviously see it. If you see something that you know your character shouldn't be seeing, you either need to figure out how to not see it or work it out with the director that come up with a way that you don't see that. The other exception I can think of to that is where a director wants confusion. In the opening to Guys and Dolls, there's a thing called Runyon Land, and it's again a pantomime, set to music in that case, that is the busyness of what's going on in the city, and everything's happening. There are big things that happen that draw focus nicely, but it's also true that other people are actually fairly active, typically in that case. But they're active in a way that's either repetitive or that doesn't draw the focus. It just says we're in the midst of the city and things are happening everywhere. So the trick for the director is to get the right thing seen, and the other action, while it can't be in the small, doesn't draw focus. So those are some of the things we're talking about on this. Okay. The other thing that has to do with, we're going to talk about two other areas, that is reading the director's mind. And one of them is, I alluded to earlier, you get to know your character very well. Indeed, you should work on getting to know your character well. Sometimes that involves either understanding what their backstory is, their story that happens before the show starts, researching it. If it's a historical character, maybe you'll look up the history of the literal person that you're playing, or if it's an imaginary character, trying to find something to anchor things in that fit within the director's vision of what the show's about. So you start to understand those things that you say, oh, well, my character wouldn't do that, or my character would handle this in this way, and so the director doesn't have to say, you should be surprised when you hear that piece of information. You should already have figured out that, hey, yeah, my character would have never known that and wouldn't have guessed that this person would say that, or has had that experience, or has that background, or whatever it might be. So you spend time trying to understand your character. The director may give you some clues in a smaller sense. And it's all right, as I indicated earlier, it's all right to disagree with the director, go up and talk to them about this. Say, I don't feel right about my character doing this. Now, the director may say, well, but no, that's not the way I see the storyline. I see you need to be this. So you may have a disagreement, and by all rights, for the good of the production, normally you go with the director's view. We don't often have, in our case, what they have in movies sometimes, where an actor just says, well, I just can't play this part because it doesn't fit with what I can understand the character to be. I can't get into the director's vision. And so they get a change of person. But yeah.
Can I just comment on that? That's, it's very appropriate to do that early on in the rehearsal.
Yeah.
it becomes less appropriate to make changes as you get closer to opening.
Definitely, yeah. If you have problems with this, you want to figure that out and come to a conclusion as soon as possible. Not only if, the extreme case, you have to have a replacement, but even in the other cases of, you don't want to keep banging up against it. Not only does it make for difficult to work together, but you're undermining, the actor could be undermining the director's vision, or, as I said earlier, the actor could convince the director that the director's vision is wrong, and that happens, yeah.
But also making changes, like after you've rehearsed the scene a lot, may well impact what your scene partners are doing and are able to do, and you may put them in an awkward position if you're someplace now that you weren't when you rehearsed it the last time.
Yeah. And in Mad's double casting at times, sometimes you run into a problem of two actors playing a part very differently. And both may be fine with the director, but it is one of the difficulties of multiple casting is sometimes that's very different.
But as long as people are consistent, you can get used to it. When I'm doing the scene with Randy, he's over there when we get to this part. When I do the scene with Jon, he's more upstage, and I can adjust to that.
Yeah.
But if somebody changes something, since the last time they did it.
And an actor not in Mad that I have dealt with before, and indeed I didn't have this problem with him, but I have reports that others did, had a tendency to do things different every night, much to his co-actor's chagrin. And that's not only not very fair, it's just not a good thing to do. Yeah, Jon.
And then another comment about this. Developing your own character is very appropriate with the caveats you don't want to change it at the last minute. If you have comments about other characters, other actors, it's important to talk with the director, not with the other actor.
Yeah.
Because you don't want actors directing each other.
Right.
Without the director knowing what's
Yeah.
going on.
Now, that there's a balance there. You don't need to go to the director for every, it's awkward for me to hand this off to you if you go upstage. Can you come a little further over here? Or, there's little things that you do directly because you don't need to involve the director in everything. But again, if it's something that deals with the character or the characterization, yes, you need to get the director involved in that. Yeah. And
Different directors have different levels of being directive about things.
yeah.
Some directors are, your right hand is too low in scene 3, raise it 3 inches, kind of. And some are, we want you to get over there and you should be angry.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes for actors. Some actors are like neutral canvases, and they really want a director who tells them who to be and how to be that person, because they really, they don't have an internal, their internal canvas is blank from this, and they want a director who will tell them exactly what to do. And other actors don't want the director to tell them too much about what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, different actors, different directors, and the interaction can be different.
Yeah.
And all the things in between those
Yes.
two.
Yeah, and this is, part of this is dealing with people, and people have differences. I've referred to a few directors that I've dealt with in the past as the kind of ones that say, enter here, exit there, and don't trip over the furniture. That's about all you get. But yes, it's also true that there's some director, what I was talking earlier about, director needs to do this blocking detail. I tend to block people more than some do, and there are some that I've dealt with that are good directors, but that just can't really do it until they see the bodies there in the real space. They are very much a real-time director, and that's fine, and some shows probably lend themselves to that approach much more. And, you know, I come from a technical background, so I'm used to dealing in some of the minutiae that others, you know, are dealing more in the artistic than I do. So, you know, each director's going to have their strengths and weaknesses, yeah.
So the one comment, we were talking earlier, Randy, you mentioned the actor who was very spontaneous on stage. The key thing is that you want this scene to be spontaneous for the audience, but it should not be for your scene partners.
Yeah.
Your scene partners, for them to do their part in helping make the scene come alive, need to know what's coming.
Yeah, that was my point, Ted.
Right.
And that's not to say you don't have sometimes a thing that halfway in the run you go, this isn't quite working, let's make a change. But you say that to the person in advance. You don't decide that on stage at the last minute and say, oh, and I did once. And in the wedding scene in Brigadoon, the first Brigadoon, way back Brigadoon. You probably remember this. On stage, I tossed this bottle to somebody, and they caught it. Ah, that was fun. Next night, I tossed it, and it landed on stage and broke into a billion pieces.
But there are times, I mean, it's live theater, so there are times when things happen and you just have to go.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Enough
Yeah.
unplanned things happen without you going off book
Right.
to make
Yeah.
more.
My
unplanned things.
comment earlier was about somebody that planned his unplanned things. Not good.
Not
Yeah, but you're right. And this is a thing about being an actor too, and Kathy and I often talk about this, is you tend to get very good at multitasking. You're thinking of 5 things at once. You know, what's my next line? Where do I need to be? How did the audience react to that, particularly in comedies where you gotta wait for laughs? What just went wrong on the stage that I gotta deal with unexpectedly? And which is the reason why stage kisses aren't that good. I mean, that exciting is what I mean. Okay. So, after you have this background that you've studied, then you've got to sell that to the audience. And again, we get back to this, you sell a lot of it through facial expressions, through how you are acting on stage. Now, sometimes it's body language too. It may be, are you uptight? Are you very relaxed? How is that going? And there are things that you are showing externally because your character would show them externally. There's sometimes things that you do that your character would not show externally, but you've got to telegraph to the audience anyway. The example I gave earlier of where I answered something with my back to the person, talking out of the back of my head, was one of those, I need to say something to you and I want to give an expression that shows what I'm thinking, that if I was actually talking to you directly, I wouldn't show on my face. So you try to find some ways to do that. One of the other things too is reacting to your own lines. Okay, you've memorized your part, you're good at, you know what you're going to say next. You know what follows this sentence, you've got, you know, a paragraph to say. You say this sentence and then this is the next sentence. So as an actor, you can spell it right out. When you're practicing, you spell it right out. But on stage, you might not spell it right out. You may have to search for the exact way you want to say it in spite of the fact that you know what you're going to say. The actor knows what the line is, but the character is figuring it out as he goes along. And his reaction might be, or his delivery might be hesitant, looking for, how am I going to say this without really getting myself into trouble, or without choosing the wrong words, or so forth. You don't have to be afraid of pauses in your line. You might purposely want to put some there. Now that said, you don't want it to get too draggy. And you don't want to pause before everything, because then you start wearing the audience out. You start getting to the point where the whole thing is dragging along. So even though your character might have to think of in reality, might do a lot of pauses, you might choose to do only the ones that are the most meaningful, most important ones. So the bottom line is, silence is not dead air. It's sometimes a real part of what you're doing to sell the character. One of the other things you got to watch out for is pet motions. Many of us have them. I have one that I used to death for a while until I realized I was doing it. I was always doing this. I found that, I can't tell you how many times I figured out a way to do that as a part of the line. And I thought, that's just getting to be overdone. I'm doing it too much. Another actor that I can recall had a tendency to, every time something surprising happened, it was this. And he was always all over the place with it. And it was something, once I told him about it, he said, oh, okay. And then it wasn't nearly as big a problem. Sometimes you might find, if it's something you're not as aware of, you might have to talk to someone. And here's a good place to talk to someone other than the director. Have one of your friends that is off stage when you're on stage keep an eye out for you. When I was in speech class in high school, they wanted to stop us from going all the time. Every time we didn't know what to say. And so she'd have someone in class had this coffee can of nails. And every time you said, they'd drop a nail. Just to get it registering on you how many times you were doing it. And it was a very effective method. Now, I don't know that you want to quite go to that extreme. But, and this is also, particularly with today, with our camcorders, hello, so handy. It's sometimes a good idea to watch a rehearsal, even an early rehearsal, to see if you're doing pet motions or how you are delivering things, because in that process, yes, sometimes you can, particularly once you get into performance and you're having much of it down, yes, one of those subroutines that's going on in the back of your mind all the time, one of those multitasks, is thinking, okay, how am I looking from over there, from that part of the audience? Am I okay? I need to open up a little more to them. You're thinking of that in parallel with all those other things you're thinking about. But early on, you're too consumed with, damn it, what is that next line? To really be thinking a lot about that. Indeed, one of the things I've tended to do as a director is the first night I have people off book, I give them very few notes. I know that they're stumbling. I know that they're embarrassed by the fact they're not off book as much as they should be. And I say to myself, if that action that they're doing is bothering me this much tonight, it'll bother me the next time that they do it. Next time's a good time to talk about it. Tonight they've got enough to think about with just, they're embarrassed enough you don't have to say, hey, and you were picking your nose up there.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. If you do have dead spots, sometimes you can find some business to do to kind of help fill those out a little bit. All right. In general, you're gonna work on your own time for that character analysis, for projection, and everyone's favorite, memorization. So memorize early. It takes just as much work to memorize early as to memorize late. But you'll feel much better if you memorize early, if you get off book early. And I try to schedule my rehearsals so that I get people off book early. I have seen productions where people were calling for lines at the last rehearsal before dress. Way too late, way too late. By that time, you should have them down. And if you've screwed it up, you cover, because that's what you're gonna have to do in performance. So, and I've often passed out techniques for memorization. How are we doing on time here? Oh, I can take a minute to do that. I've found one of the best is these days is if you have a smartphone, there are plenty of apps to help you learn. But the bottom line on memorizing is you need something that puts you on the spot and gives you immediate feedback when you're wrong. If you just read your lines a lot, the lines are a constant prop. You think you know it. Gee, that sounds familiar. Of course it is. You just looked at it, you know? So reading it a lot or just listening to it, which is the equivalent. You might, even if you're trying to say it just before the line, you're probably saying it just after the line. You're getting a little too much help. You need that business where you say it and then you see whether you were right or not. If you want to do it by reading, you cover it. You say the line, you see what your cue line is, you put yourself in the line, say what the next line is, and then uncover it. Oh, no, that wasn't it. Okay, back up a little bit, let's go into it again. All right, you got it right that time. Now, let's see if I can do the whole page. Okay, you build yourself up a little at a time. If you got a paragraph, don't do the whole paragraph and then read the whole paragraph. You'll forget whether you made mistakes earlier. Do it sentence by sentence or a couple of lines at a time. If you're doing an audio or on the app, the best apps, the one that I use called Line Learner, but there's a bunch of them out there. You make a recording first. You say, okay, this is the other person's, this is a cue line. You don't have to do their whole paragraph. This is the last part of it, okay. You do their whole line, or do the last part of the line, and then you hit a button that says, now this is my line. And then you say your line. And you hit a button that says it's their line, and you go back and forth. When it plays it back, it leaves a gap first for your line, for you to say it. And then it plays your line back, so you're hearing it right away. And again, if you've got a paragraph, you do a sentence or so, and then you say, and the next one's my line still, and the next one's my line still, so that you're forcing yourself to do those. Then you can do it where you don't do the cue lines. And that's really a good thing to do. And I learned this from my wife. She was very good at this. She'd say, okay, I got 17 lines in this scene. Let me do them in order with no cues. Once you got to the point, you get no feedback here other than, that was only 16. What did I leave out? Ah, yes. This is the one I left out. And the reason that's so important is for when the other guy screws up. It does no good to say, I got my lines perfect, folks, as long as he doesn't make a mistake. You've got to be able to pick up on when they jump, particularly if they jump ahead. God, is there something important that the audience doesn't know that I got to go back and pick up?
And that's why you need to know their lines too,
Yes, that's right.
because you might have to improvise, especially if they leave out something that's important.
Yeah. So memorization, it's a bear, but it's there. It's a part of the job. Yeah.
One of the hardest things for me is getting it from short-term memory to long-term memory.
Yes.
Because I will remember that line, that set of lines or whatever, and then when I close the book, turn off the app or whatever it is and come back, it's like, what? Okay, what was that? Wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just argues for doing it a lot, because you're right, short-term memory will help. And when I have people do first time off book, I usually let them be on, or almost insist that they be on book the first pass and then the second pass off book, because I want the short-term memory to help them that first time where they're worried about it. But then the next week, or the next time we do the scene, when I'm counting on them to really be off book, yeah.
Well, getting it to go there, that's what my problem is, to get, like, pushing it back into my long-term memory.
Yeah.
How to get it to do that.
Yeah, so. what I
It's
do-
just it's
yeah,
repetition.
What I do as an actor is, before a rehearsal that's going to be off book, I will run my lines sometime in the few hours before rehearsal to get it in short-term memory
Yeah.
to make sure I do that. Likewise, for the other part of that, for longer-term memory, I just find that, again, repetitiveness helps, but sometimes what I do when I'm directing my cast, and we're going to come up to an off-book scene, I will have them go through the scene once with book and then do it off book, or just sit down and do a reading of the whole scene, put the books down, and then go up and act it. But either way, put it in their short-term memory just before the scene, before you put them up there. Either do it words only, no actions, or everything with a book, and then.
Yeah.
So, as a director, one of the most frustrating things I've found is, as far as having people memorize lines, is the actors who say, I can't memorize until I know my blocking.
Yeah.
And I understand that putting your blocking with your lines is useful to help you remember them.
Yeah.
Because your movements will help also give you clues as to what you're supposed to be doing next. But you can memorize before you know your blocking.
Yeah.
It's just that blocking and putting it all together can help you cement it.
Right.
I
And
actually
it also
have the
depends on what
opposite.
kind of learner you are.
I'm sorry, what?
Sorry.
I was saying that the opposite is that, like, when I use Line Learner, there's nowhere for me to learn my blocking.
Well, you go back and you can add to a scene. You can say, okay, here's another line that's somebody else's line, but it's really my blocking, or my line. You can put move stage right as though it were a line, and then you learn that as a line. So that's one of the things I've done sometimes on that, where I have complicated blocking. A lot of times, if I've learned the lines early enough, and the blocking's straightforward, it's not too much of a problem, but sometimes it is.
Comes eventually, if you do it enough times, I feel like the blocking comes with the lines, but
Yeah.
at first anyways, it's like you memorize the lines, but the block, you can add, I've added blocking
Yeah.
like it's dialogue, but if it's not me saying the dialogue, so it kind of goes
Yeah.
in one ear and out the other
Yeah.
sometimes.
You know, the underpinning to all of this is every actor needs to figure out who they are on the stage before any of this takes place,
Yeah.
so they know how they're going to react. And when you figure out who that character is, never set foot on the stage without being totally in that character.
Yeah.
You know, because you can't walk in as Joe Blow and then suddenly, bam, I'm
Yeah.
in character. You have to be in character from the beginning, and before you even get to the stage.
Yeah.
And then the lines make sense.
Yeah.
You can remember them. You can remember the block, but you have to know who you are before that can happen.
Good point. Okay, well, I want to move on to the third area that I really wanted to talk about in terms of reading the director's mind. And that's one of our favorite ones, and that's at auditions.
Can I just
Yeah.
interject something? Because much of what you've been talking about is on a stage like where you are now, a proscenium. But many of the blocking things you talk about are different if you're in three-quarter round or, God forbid, completely in the round.
Yes.
Can you just say a few things about how that changes things?
Sure. As, of course, Mad almost never does things in the three-quarter round. We occasionally have a thrust. But out at Greenbelt Arts Center, almost all of their shows are in the three-quarter round. Obviously, stage right and stage left are not quite as meaningful in the round. Sometimes you do northeast, southwest, and sometimes you just okay, we're going to designate this as downstage for purposes of writing our blocking down, but we understand all of those things are different. All of the business about the turning in, out and so forth, by and large goes out the door, although in the total round. In the three-quarter round, it's lessened, it's made different, and indeed, at times I've directed at GAC, instead of worrying so much about being facing the audience, it's more a question of being in line with the poles over there. If you put two people in line with the poles, everybody sees both characters, short of it being way downstage. But there's a lot more that, yes, this goes through, but with Mad, fortunately, most of the time this isn't a problem. So I don't think we'll take it too much more than that. Okay, so what is a director looking for when you come into auditions? What is important to the director? Let me ask you, what things do you think of when you think of what's important to a director? Shout it out.
How someone presents themselves on stage, their comportment, their posture, their gestures, just, are they all over the place, or is there some meaning to it?
Okay. What else?
A sense of the character.
Sense of the character. What else?
The full presentation, not just lines or movement or smiling or whatever it may be, but the person as a whole.
Okay. Yeah.
I think of two things. How do they work with the other people in the audition? Usually a person's not auditioning completely by themselves. How do they interact with the other actors? And when they're doing a scene, does it start to come alive when they're in it?
Okay.
Enunciation.
What else is important to a director? Yeah.
So I'll say a couple of really basic things. One is be cooperative. If the director tells you to do something, don't say, "Oh, I don't need to do that." It's fine to not be able to do it, but to say, "Oh, I'm not going to do that," shows that you're not willing to take direction.
Yeah.
So that can include singing and dancing, even if you're auditioning for a part that doesn't have singing and dancing.
Yeah.
Give it your go. The director will see you can't do it and won't cast you in a singing role. And another thing is that if you have the opportunity to be prepared, then you should be prepared.
Yeah.
Like Mad puts out the sides, so don't go into reading your sides and not be able to read them because you didn't bring your reading glasses. I think you did that once, and you didn't get the part you wanted. If you have a chance to practice reading the sides, then practice them.
Yeah.
Think about them.
What else does a director care about in trying to cast a show at auditions?
You. I mean, as in, you as the actor, you are putting yourself out there, this is me, and you may or may not be the right person, but, yeah, you gotta be the character. But you, just as a person, be out there, your stage presence, who you are, how you present.
That's important because you may picture yourself as character A, but if you present yourself well, the director may see you are perfect for character B in their vision of the show. And it may not be the part you came out for, but you may fit the director's vision for what they want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Enunciation and projection.
Enunciation, projection. What else is a director looking for? I haven't heard the most obvious one yet. Yeah.
Act it, don't read
Okay.
it. Yeah.
How good of an actor you are, or dancer, or singer, okay?
All of the above.
Yeah. What else?
Attitude. Are you interested in being there? Are you interested in doing what the director asks you?
Yeah.
You know.
Are you a diva?
Yeah.
Well,
Well-
they're easy to work with, yeah.
What you bring to the character itself, even sometimes you might bring something that the director didn't even know they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Energy.
Energy,
If you
good.
get up there and cower at the stage and don't,
Yeah.
you're not gonna get in there.
Yeah. Okay. And what's the other one I was thinking of that people often say? Well, okay. So I won't try to speak for, we have a number of directors here, as you've already figured out. I won't try to speak for everybody, but I'll certainly say for myself that one of my least favorite things is auditions. It's so hard, particularly when you're auditioning people that you know. It's, you know you're going to disappoint some folks that are your friends.
Or used to be.
It's a rough problem. But,
Eliot, we still like you.
You're still not speaking.
Just being snide.
Every director has people that are angry at them.
yes, unfortunately. And
Just things that-
in fact, I would even go so far as to say, at least for myself, that I don't agree with my casting. If casting is what one person got in one part. Because I might need that person so much more in another part. Because even though they were perfect for this part, I got two people for that part. I don't have anyone else for this part. So if you talk about perfect casting, it never happens in many cases. Yeah.
And the corollary is sometimes there are three people who are excellent for the part, and you can only cast one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, just an
Right.
aspect of that.
So, but my point is, you don't even necessarily cast the best one
Right.
because you may have other considerations. And
It's an ensemble, pieces have ensemble aspects. Sometimes like the male lead and the female lead, each person's excellent, but they can't be together because of, they're supposed
that's
to
one-
be a husband and wife, and there's a 30-year age difference that is a little uncomfortable, for
yeah,
example.
that's one that I'm surprised didn't come up in when I was asking for what are you looking for. One of them is how well do they match?
Yeah.
Either a particular character or the other people that are there. So what I'm trying to say is when it comes to casting, director's not just looking for, well, skill. You know, how good of an actor are you? How good of a singer are you? It's, number one, it's a skill mix, just for starters, on a musical, for sure. But even in a straight play. It has to do with how the director sees the part. So, again, you might have a person that's excellent, but just doesn't fit the director's view of what that person is, and it may have to do with their age, as you mentioned, or their looks, or their build, or their, all of that.
But if you present well enough, you just might change people's minds.
And yes, there are times when you'll change your mind, and indeed, directors try to be much more flexible these days than sometimes they have been in the past. Directors as a class have been in the past. To not just always say, oh, the ingenue has to be this young, or this has to be a male even, this has to be a female. There's much more flexibility in that. But they may be looking for how they're matched. Ease of working with was brought up, and that, particularly you've got a history there. Sometimes, certain people are very difficult to work with, and so you are, if you have all things else equal, you might choose to, or even not quite equal. If someone's more flexible, you might be able to say, oh, I can get this person to the point I need them. This person has their own idea of what this is. There are times in auditions I've asked people to do things totally wrong-headed. Just to see, will you meet me halfway? So I asked someone to play the part as a very stupid person. and
It's not a stretch.
the person actually did a very good job of it, yeah. But,
One other consideration that just occurred to me is that sometimes when you have, often you can have more characters than actors. And so actors have to play two different characters. And that adds the level that, sometimes somebody would be perfect for this character but couldn't do the second one that they need to be matched with. And, you can't have two characters in the same scene played by the same person. So.
yeah.
There are
And of
really
course,
stupid problems, like, your actor can't come on Thursday nights and everyone else whose audition can come Thursday nights.
well, yeah, there are mechanical ones too, yes. But I was really thinking more here about just the whole process of casting. And like I said, the biggest thing is the director has to cast the whole show and has to figure out how to use the pool they have to best serve the show. And in Mad, oftentimes, cast it twice. We have so often that we have double casting, either caused by a desire to spread out the wealth, which is laudable, but also out of considerations of people that have to go on travel or whatever it might be, that they can't do all the performances. So there's an awful lot for it. So that brings us back to, how do you read the director's mind, and how do you prepare for auditions? And that brings up one thing that's been said already several times tonight. When you're auditioning for a part, not so much. You should really audition for the show. Because as John mentioned, the director might see you as a different part, more than what you're thinking of. There may be all these considerations we've been talking about, such that the part that you would most like to do is out of reach for reasons completely out of your control, just because they have to solve this puzzle. So it's always better to approach auditions with the idea that you're going to audition not just for a role, but for the show, and put yourself out there. That said, I understand that it's a lot of work to do a show. And I fully appreciate that some people will say to me, believe me, I would love to say I'll do anything, but there's a level beyond which the effort exceeds what I'm willing to do for that size role. So if somebody says, sorry, I won't do these roles because they are smaller than what I'm willing to do, I have to honor that. And I would rather know it. I want to know it up front. Because the last thing you want to do is come up with a casting only to find out that somebody at the top says, oh, that's not the part I wanted, I'm sorry, I don't want to do it. It drops out, and now you got to start shuffling things, including maybe going back to someone who you said, I chose you for this part, now I need you to do this part instead. Oh, that's nice, I'm second choice. So it's much better to let people know in advance what you won't do. Yeah.
And from the point of an auditionee As director, please be honest about that. Please don't say you'll take any part if that's not the case. Because I've had that happen many times where somebody will say they'll take a part, and then when you offer them, they say, well, I was really wanted to be this lead person, so I'm not going to do the show.
Yeah.
And
It's very hard. It makes the whole thing harder. So yes, and indeed, my audition forms never say what part are you auditioning for. They say what parts won't you take, because number one, you may see yourself in a part that you're really not suited for, or maybe you are suited for, but I need you elsewhere. But you're just better off, and you increase your chances of getting a part if you really are willing to take those other parts.
And the counter to what I said is, please don't say that you won't take a part thinking you'll push the director to give you a better one, if in fact you will take that part.
Yes.
Because I've had that happen too.
Yes.
And I won't offer a part if you say you won't take it.
Yeah. Don't gaming the system is not a good way to go. So, that said, when you're preparing to audition, what can you attack? Well, we talked about a lot of things that the director might be looking for earlier, but a lot of those are things that you can't change. Now, skill you can change over time. 2 days before an audition, you probably are not going to suddenly become
Fred Astaire.
Coloratura soprano or something, So, yes, work on those over the long term. When you're preparing for an audition, more the question of reading the script in advance or whatever is useful and important. So we want to do the things that will be able to show us off at our best. Yeah.
I find if I haven't seen the show before, watching YouTube clips of the show or even the whole show
Yeah.
is very helpful.
Yeah. And the last time I gave this, I couldn't have said that. YouTube wasn't around. But yes, there are a lot of shows that you can see versions of. And yeah, you can argue that that's going to focus you on one particular way of presenting it, particularly if you can see several different ones. Sometimes that's good. Don't get too tied up into the way one person did it. I mean, it's certainly true that if you ever saw Carol Channing in Hello, Dolly, it was the Carol Channing show. It was Hello, Carol. So certain actors certainly became synonymous with a role, but that wasn't the only way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, if I may, I might disagree with that. I think an actor preparing for an audition, it is better for them to go in and present that character with some conception versus just reading it.
Yeah.
Even if that's not the director's conception, because the director will see, okay, this person came to the auditions with something in mind and is acting it, and we'll work together later to make it more in keeping with the vision for the show.
I think the point was seeing it versus not knowing the part, not knowing the show.
Right.
Yeah. Reading the whole script, that's good. Certainly that reading at least the sides is the start. Reading the whole script's better. Seeing a production has the advantage of seeing it as a cohesive. A lot of shows I found are much better seen than they are on trying to read them on the page. I've read shows that I thought, gee, this is a dog. And then seeing a version, oh, gee, I just really didn't get that from a reading. So, yeah.
I think the distinction between what the two of you are saying is I agree with John that these are good tools for auditioning. What you're talking about is your interpretation of the character, more like after you've gotten the part, when you're trying to create your own part. But I think seeing something before for an audition helps you be more prepared, even if it's not what interpretation you're going to use long time in the role.
Okay, so I think there's a variety of feelings about how much, exactly what form that is, and we'll let that be something that different people feel different about. But certainly preparing helps, and a lot of the other things we were talking about, your energy, your how you deal with people and so forth. Yeah, you want to put your best foot forward, but you're not going to change your personality overnight, probably. So the thing is to approach it with those things in mind and try to show yourself at your best. I'm going to give you a couple of things we might talk about trying to show you at your best. Now, here's another controversial one. Should you dress for the part?
No.
Well, if you're dancing, dress to dance.
Dress for dance, yes. But I mean, does it help you to dress as the character you have in mind?
Don't let Jennifer hear
For
this.
me, no.
Yeah.
It doesn't
If
hurt
you
them?
come in all dressed and having memorized the part and all that, I'm not going to be impressed by that.
Yeah.
Does it hurt?
And
Yes.
I think
No.
most directors will
Yes.
tell you that.
It can.
No,
Yeah.
well,
It-
it can.
it-
For me, I'll
the
just ignore it.
About the only exception I can think of is if you're trying to break a stereotype that you individually have. If you have always dressed very conservatively and this character is very flamboyant, can you break out of your, be the butterfly maybe? Maybe something like that, but even that's a stretch. Or if being a little more in the style of the character helps you sell it better. But by and large, the directors are going to say, I know I can dress them later, they will look the part, that's fine, that's all I'm worried about. Dressing for the part, by and large, is not that useful. Yeah.
I kind of agree because I think the director may see a person who is dressed for the part as too set on what the part is and how they're going to play it, and not open to what the director thinks they ought to be wearing. If you come up with the perfect, what you think is the perfect costume, it's just what Clark Gable wore in that scene, and the director is like, I hated Clark Gable in that particular part.
Yeah.
I want you to get out of my house and don't come back.
The only exception to that I've seen, and this is amusing, is when Rosalie Dalemans auditioned for The Mystery of Edwin Drood, and she was pregnant, and she wore a baby bump, an artificial one, to show the director what she would look like when the performances were going on. And I think that probably helped her get the part.
Well, it certainly made her point. Whether it was needed or not is another story.
I
Yeah.
wanted to tie this question back to what we said earlier. If you dress for the part, you are pretty much committed to that part, and you're focusing the director's attention on you in that role. What Randy was saying, remember, you are auditioning for the show, and the director has to cast the whole show. If you only look like character A, you may no longer be and you're not that right for that part for whatever reason. In the director's casting, they may have a harder time seeing you as characters B, C, or D to cast you in the show if you only dress yourself for one part. So it can hurt you because you may rule yourself out of other parts that you might have been considered for had you not done that.
But then the opposite, that the director should be able to see you, even if you're wearing one thing, they should be able
Right.
to see you.
Yeah.
Should,
And
should, but
And-
it can hurt you, I'm just saying.
Yeah, and
yeah,
I kind of
in
feel
general, I don't think there are many people that think that dressing the part is the case, but I have seen
It
people come
comes
in.
off as if you're trying to game the system.
right.
Yeah, so I would say similar to that, as I said earlier, coming in and being cooperative with the process of audition is really important, because if you don't cooperate with the process, then that says to the director that you're somebody who's not going to be directable.
Yeah.
And, to try to, it comes across as like gaming the system, right? That you're going to be the one person who's dressed. I mean, dressed in clearly in a particular role. If you're the one person, it's like this is somebody who's not going to be a team player with the other actors.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think dressing nicely makes a difference? Like, as opposed to like, I don't know, jeans with holes in it versus like a nice business casual?
I think it, if it's your own personal style, then come as yourself, come to the audition the way that you normally dress. Or, of course, be prepared to move, to dance. If there's a dance audition, you need to be able to, you need to be wearing things that allow you to dance. Don't come in Crocs to a musical audition, right? Because you can't dance in Crocs. But other than that, I think everybody in this room is dressed in a way that they could come into an audition. But if you're dressing if you're dressing in a way that's clearly dressing for a part that's different from something you would wear anywhere else, then I would say that says that you're not being part of the process.
Speaking for myself as director, I'm going to filter all of that out. I don't care how you're dressed. I don't care if you memorize the part. I care if you act it. So if memorizing it helps you act it, that's fine. It's not going to be, ooh, they've already got it memorized, so I should cast them. I'm just going to filter all of that out. It really doesn't matter at all. It's not going to make me want to cast you or not cast you. It's just you're just wasting your time doing it. Trying to impress the director that you are a particular character is just wasting your time.
Well, I'd like to move on to the next item on my list, which is memorizing the part.
You mean for
That is
audition?
literally the next thing on my list. Eliot has already pointed out that isn't something that is going to necessarily impress the director. It says you got a lot of desire, but then again, a lot of people have a lot of desire. So, by and large, memorizing the part doesn't sell much to me. Now, I will say, if you're going to sing a song, there's a real advantage to memorizing the song, because then you can act it and sell it more than if your head's buried in the sheet music. So for the song, it's a little different story. There, I think you do give yourself an opportunity to show your skills better if you've got the song memorized, or at least mostly memorized. Yeah.
I'm going to counter myself just a little bit, because I once had a show where a guy read beautifully at auditions, never memorized the part. Closing night, still didn't have it memorized, forced the other actors to have to ad-lib around him completely. I would reject him out of hand if he comes to an audition for me, except maybe if he memorized it before the audition, he could maybe impress me that he could memorize that part. But it would have to be at the same scale of what he's doing in auditions, because just memorizing one scene out of 15 isn't going to impress me. But
I
it
know
can
what you're
help if
talking
you have
about.
a reputation.
I know who he's talking.
But the thing about memorizing, you show you can memorize by doing that, but in fact, the director is going to have to presume, for people he doesn't know, that they can memorize the part. That's unfortunate because some of them can't, or have a great deal of trouble memorizing the part. And yes, you end up casting them and you have to drag them screaming and yelling into eventually memorizing the part. I had a situation like that. I had a person that had an awful lot of problems with a relatively small part. But we got through it, but he did cause some consternation. The next time he auditioned for me, I said, okay, I'd like to cast you in this show, but we had an awful lot of problem with memorization last time. Will you really work on this so that it's not a problem? And he assured me he would, and he did. So I appreciate that. But by and large, when the director sees you, maybe they know your history and that you're good or bad at memorizing, but in a lot of cases they don't, or don't remember, or don't. You tend, if they finally got it by closing night, you don't remember that opening night was a disaster. Yeah.
Well, I think that also comes in the category of you don't necessarily get the part you read for the auditions.
Yeah.
So if you memorize unless you're going to memorize all the parts in the play and have the entire play by memory, which would be amazing, you have to consider that you might have memorized the 300 lines for the particular part and you get cast as something completely different. You have to start all over anyway.
Yeah.
I think when you've got the audition sides in advance, I think that what you said, Randy, about the song
Yeah.
also applies to the sides. You don't have to memorize the sides, but you are going to do a better audition if you're familiar enough with it that you don't have to have your eyes buried in the script.
Yeah, and
You know,
I'll
if
come
you
back
can,
to that point in a
cue
minute.
Oh, yeah, I
yourself.
totally agree with that.
Cue
Yeah.
yourself and then say the line to your scene partner.
But you don't know which part you'll be reading for necessarily.
Well, so you prepare what you want. You don't have to prepare everything, but I think, I don't know.
It
I mean,
doesn't hurt
certainly
to
when
be-
I'm directing, I ask, does anybody want to read a part that they haven't read? And so the one that you've prepared, for the part that maybe is the one that you want, you should then get up and say, I'd like to read this part.
But it doesn't hurt to be familiar with the script for every part that you could conceivably read for.
Okay. I'll go ahead and I was going to do this in a few minutes, but I'll go ahead and do this now. Show you a little trick that I've used that I like. And let me grab a script here. I have one. One of the things you can do, if you're in a scene with only two people and all the lines are short, and you haven't, even if you've read it before, if you haven't memorized it, you're pretty much stuck with your eyes in the script. But if you're in a scene either that has a lot of people, and so you only have the line every once in a while, or periodically the only other person in the scene has a paragraph or several lines, a little trick you can do is you issue your line. So I've just done a line. I quickly look down and find my next line, put my thumb on it, and look at what the cue is. Now I'm free to interact. I can listen, I can watch. When I hear my cue, I'm ready. I might, if it's a short enough response, I might even remember the response without looking. But of course I got to find the next line too. So you can give your line, go down and find your next one, put your thumb on it, go ahead and then react to what's going on. It's a way of doing even a cold reading and still being able to show how you can respond to the others on stage. And it's a good way of showing your abilities more than being stuck here, reading a paragraph that somebody else is speaking, doing nothing. Instead, you can react to that person. Yeah.
Is it better to look away from the script and react and then maybe miss the next line? Or is it better to keep your eyes...
You don't miss the line.
No, I know, but I'm saying what's better, like...
If your line is short enough that you don't need to look down to deliver your line, then go ahead and even deliver your line that way. And then as the next person starts, find your next line. But if your line is long enough that you can't memorize it on the fly, in effect, it's more than a couple of words, then you're gonna have to, read your line.
I guess my question is, trying to do it the way you were just saying,
Yeah,
there are gonna be times where you're gonna maybe miss the key, the word, and so what's better to make sure you're right all the time, or to give the impression that you're,
missing the cue, nobody's gonna charge you for. It's an audition. Missing a word, blowing a line, mispronouncing something. That's small stuff. Nobody is out there making tally marks about how many lines you missed. They know you're gonna learn your lines. So, you don't wanna do this to the extent that everybody's constantly waiting, hey, it's your part, no. So, make sure you see what the line is, and if you're suspecting that maybe you've forgotten it or something, go back and look at it again. You got your thumb on it, so you can find it fast.
Right.
That's the whole point, is that you're ready to do your line. You're not gonna lose that, but you free up sometimes big part. Sometimes there's a big gap. If there's a number of people on stage, there's a big gap between your lines. And now all of a sudden you can really do some reacting. You can do some acting there and show your skills much more. And my point of it all, in a lot of this has been, there's an awful lot about auditioning that you have little control over. You can't change your body type or your whatever, or your gender necessarily, or whatever it might be. There's an awful lot about audition that is, put yourself up there and get what you can get, and hopefully you'll get something good or get something better the next time. But what you want to do is take the things that you do have some control over and maximize what you can present. And this is just one little trick that I found has helped me at times.
No, what Randy's saying is important, because one of the things that you look for is if a person is acting between their lines. Because there are a lot of people, even in performances, who will act their line and then will just be a rock on the stage while everybody else does their lines before coming back for acting their next line. You want to act while other people are reciting their lines and not just stand there.
Yeah.
So the point is that when you audition, like everything else, you're auditioning the whole character. That includes the things that you say and the things that you don't say, or the things you do between. But when you're asking which is more important, the important thing is to read your lines. If, as Randy says, if there's a big chunk, you can spend 3 or 4 lines acting and then go back and check your thumb and check what the line is and what the cue is. You don't have to spend that entire break doing that. It's something that adds to your audition if you can show that between your lines that you have a character as well. You just have to get, like he was saying, when it's a 2-person thing, you may not have as much time to do this when it's back and forth. But when there's 6 people on stage and you know there's going to be a half a page or 10 lines before, you can go and look up an act for 5 lines and then go back and look down, find your place, find your cue, and be ready to go. So it's up to you to measure your own skills on how much you can read and how much you can keep in your head of what your next action will be, as to how much you can do some of these things between. When you're not as familiar, you're going to do less of it. When you become more familiar, you will do more of it.
Yeah. And a good point is, this is a great opportunity in the workshop when we're reading scripts to practice it. Because you can, even though we're not watching necessarily people deliver lines while they're reading, you can still practice the same thing. Even if you're looking up and you're not trying to react to the other stuff, you can practice the mechanics of the techniques. Yeah.
I think part of it is like in the audition, you pick a person to be and be that person through the whole audition, even if the person you're being is a person who's reading if part of the person you're being, the person who's reading the script.
I'm not quite following what you're saying. Yeah,
Pick what, am I a nervous person?
Oh.
Am I a?
yeah,
what kind of-
okay,
pick
you're
a
saying be
character to
consistent.
be,
Okay,
And then be that character while you're doing it, however that comes out.
yeah, okay. For a particular character, yeah, you're trying to be consistent in the character. You're not trying to give multiple interpretations, although sometimes, again, as director, I've asked people to change an interpretation.
Well,
But that's
I'm just
another
thinking, is the audition process, if you're going to show that you can act, pick a person to be when you're auditioning, whoever it is. And when you're reading, you're acting while you're reading the script in that you're being an actor
Yeah.
rather than being yourself.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't know, okay.
Okay. Let me just finish up a few here. So I wrote down a few things, including the reading trick that I just told you about, that I think are things that'll help you show your skill in the audition process. One is you want to try to move around a little bit and react to the other people. So you don't just plant yourself and read. You try to act the part. The reading trick gives you the time to do that reaction a little more, but it also may make it a little more natural then for you to walk around to someone, particularly if you're trying to, you have a conversation with this person and then someone else, yeah.
So sometimes I go to auditions and people, like if it says drinking a glass, drinking a
Yeah.
soda, and they'll sit there and they'll drink a soda during the cold reading.
Yeah.
How important is that?
Again, auditions, you figure, in fact, actually, one of the things I do when I do sides, I retype them purposely so I can rip out all the things that I don't want them to be distracted by in stage directions. And what I leave in typically is because I do want them to pay attention to it. But yes, oftentimes you get the standard script and it's got all kinds of directions in there. By and large, you don't want to pay any attention to the stage directions, which is why I try to erase them, because it's hard to skip over and say, oh, that's all stage, oh, there's a line buried in the middle of the stage directions. So.
So I kind of tend, when I'm at auditions, to think that it's more important to get the character across and not worry about like
Right.
stage direction, but I've always wondered whether, as a director, they may prefer seeing that.
No, I don't think a director is by and large looking for you to follow the stage directions. But what I was suggesting more was ad-libbing motion that fits what you're doing. So if I need to talk to this person there and then, oh, I come back and tell this person something or whatever, yeah, feel free to move around a little bit, because it shows that you're not stiff, that you can, how you can act and move. And again, you're trying to show yourself off at your best. And the director wants to see you at your best. They want to see what you're able to do and not have it hidden away by superfluous things that either don't matter or you can at best presume people are going to memorize their lines, for example, things like that. Naturalness in face, again, you want to sell the character as best you can with your expressions. But don't steal the focus in auditions. That is really bad. You know, it's bad. It's terrible in performance, but it's also bad in auditions. That looks both amateurish and not very. Steal focus. Okay, so if they're talking over there and I'm going, oh, gee, doing something that pulls the attention towards me, when in fact I'm not the one that's attention should be on. Okay, so and sometimes people think they're doing it in order to show reaction, and again, as we were saying earlier, even in shows, you want to show reaction in the small. So yes, you're going to react. She says she's pregnant. Oh, okay, you know, I may have a reaction to that. But if But if you're constantly doing stuff that draws the attention, when in fact the attention is not on you in that set of lines, then that's what we mean by stealing focus. So, and then the other thing I wrote down was practice on your own, and reading, the cold readings are always good for that kind of thing. And don't worry about missed words, which we already mentioned earlier. The other thing I skipped over earlier when we were talking about memorizing is dance. If you're given dance in advance, which we've tended to do a little more in recent years, again with YouTube, thank you very much, then it makes sense to go through that. Again, you're not walking in expected to have it all down pat. In fact, if anything, that may overdo it. If you're going for a really major dance part, it might make sense, you know, to do something. But in the general, everybody get out there and move. We're going to give you, you know, 16 bars of movement to learn. If they've taken the trouble to post it in advance, it's worthwhile. If not memorizing, at least getting yourself familiar with it so that you're a little more able to show what you can do eventually. Choreographers have the same problem. They have to extrapolate from what you can learn in 5 minutes to what you can learn in 8 weeks. So that's a tricky extrapolation to do.
Then there's the,
Are you going to comment about callbacks?
Callbacks? Callbacks are a strange animal. And auditions in community theater are very different than obviously professional auditions. Professional auditions, you get, you know, do 8 bars of a song and you're out of here, you know, because they're not worried about so much about the desire to look like they're being fair or open to everybody or whatever. So we bend over backwards to try and help people more on that. Callbacks, oftentimes we have the situation that we don't call back people even though we know we're going to put them in that part. They don't need to see that, already figured that out. So but we don't want to tell them that yet because there, again, might be, oh, this person didn't take that part, I got to switch people around. So there is a tendency to say, don't read anything into whether you're called back or not. If I call you back, it's because I need to see some combinations or some people. It may be even that you already have a part, and I do call you back because I need to see how other alternatives read against you. Other, you know, your romantic lead counterpart matches up with you. So that
For the ultimate in don't read anything into this, I had an audition that I was reading for once, and I had a person I was casting for role A. I needed to see how B acted opposite A, but my A actress was not available for callbacks. So I had another actress called in, reading the part of A, opposite some others, so that I could see how the B characters would interact.
Yeah.
Okay? So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
That callbacks, as Randy said, callbacks are very different, especially in community theater. You never know what the director's problem is, and there are many unusual problems with people who don't do this professionally to try to handle. So
Yeah.
you can't read too much.
Yeah. And John, did you have some other ideas that you wanted to add to, since you
Yeah.
brought up callback?
I mean, yeah, that's true. When I call people back, I usually have a question that I called them back in order to answer a question I have. And that could be, you know, which of 2 people is the best for the part, but it can also be, as has been said, you know, who's going to be working with them. But sometimes I've called back people. I did once call somebody back and said, I want you to memorize this because it was a kid, and I didn't know whether, I suspected they would have trouble memorizing. And they did.
Yeah.
They still had trouble, but they got it at the end. But I would say also, though, if you're called back for a part, go and work on those sides.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be reading them again, and this time, it might only be 2 days, but that's 2 days that you can concentrate on preparing for that one part. You might get called back for more than one part, and you might get called back for one part, not get it, and get something else. I mean, especially with Mad, where we try to cast out almost everybody.
Yeah.
But I would say the biggest thing is, if you're called back for a part, then you should prepare for that.
Yeah.
For that part, and you have a couple more days to prepare for it.
Now, that said, I have had, I guess, music directors or choreographers, mostly music directors, that have wanted to have something done at callbacks that I said, there's no reason to do that. It doesn't answer a question. It's only a right of initiation, and we don't need that. I can
What do you mean?
even name
To sing?
what it was. It was Fiorello, and Chris wanted you to sing the Italian verse. I said,
Sometimes,
the Fiorellos can learn Italian. That doesn't prove anything.
but sometimes there is something like when we did Drood to see if somebody could do the Pattersong fast, that they may not have auditioned.
And again, I didn't feel that was necessary, because I figured anybody can learn to do a patter song fast given 8 weeks. Given 2 days, not so sure. It just wasn't, I didn't feel like it was a fair
Okay.
choice. But yes, the bottom line is different directors may feel differently about that. So
I'll also say that the one time I didn't do callbacks when I was directing, because the Mad does committees, and the committee thought we had a cast that was ready to go, and didn't need to answer any questions. I really regretted not doing callbacks.
yeah.
Just because I needed a couple of days to think about things.
Right.
And then I swapped a few people.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
Eliot's point is really his mindset, because like in Carousel, you actually had, I was up for the role of Billy, and Eliot wanted to make sure that I could do a 7-minute song that actually had 6 different characterizations being played across it, so he made me come back for
It's the
callbacks
key
to do
song of the
soliloquy.
whole
It's a
show.
hard song. It's a hard song. You had a reason you needed to see it.
Yeah.
I'm saying
Yeah.
you had a reason that
But
you
it's
needed
also,
to see
you
it.
know,
You had a reason.
the show hinges on the ability to do that song
I had to
and
do-
sell it, not
Yeah,
just
long
Yeah.
one, too.
and act it, not just sing
You
it.
had a reason. You had a reason.
Anyway,
I forgot.
yes.
So I just want to say, based on my decades of rejection at auditions and some successes, the most important, we've talked about a lot of technical things, all good stuff. But don't think about all of that when you're up there auditioning. If you're only auditioning once a year, you're going to have a hard time thinking about all that thing. Go out, practice auditioning if you want to learn how to audition. Go out and audition for shows even if you don't care, you don't want to get cast in the show. Go out, audition for parts you're not, you won't get cast in, right? Just go to practice auditioning. That's where you learn how to do all these technical things for how to audition. Then when you're coming to one you care about, dress in a way that makes you feel comfortable and confident about yourself, right? You want to present yourself in the best way you can, because you want to go in there with confidence. You want to go in there saying, this may be the only time I get to do this show, and I am going to have fun, and I am going to show them that I'm capable of it, even if I don't get to do it for real. And that's the kind of attitude you have to go in with, and you have to have that practice of all this technical stuff that Randy's been telling us, which is great, right? And all these considerations, and all these people have said, yeah, but when you go into that audition, just be you, present yourself as best you can, have a lot of energy, and just go for it.
Yeah, good point. Actually, my wife Kathy really enjoys doing auditions, even when it's a part that she says, I know they're never gonna cast me in this role, but when else am I gonna get to sing this song?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Lelia's mother always had that attitude.
Wait,
Your mother loved auditioning.
Sorry. I thought it was really valuable to say.
My mother's
wait,
life.
hello, no, you got the floor over here right now.
I'm sorry. I thought that was really valuable to say, and I totally agree with what you're saying. And also, you need to learn, well, most of us, I'm in somewhat the same position. I've been cast for quite a few things. I've been rejected for many things, is that you have to be able to accept rejection. I mean, I've had people who got angry because they were not cast. I've had people who got angry when they weren't cast, and you know why they weren't cast. I don't mean to badmouth anybody at all, and I'm not talking about anyone in this room. But if you can't handle rejection, then you probably shouldn't audition.
Right, but what Randy has been saying in kind of many different ways here is that if you get rejected, it's not about you. It's about the show. It's about the match between what the director is looking for and who you are and your skill level and your body type and all those things. But it's about matching. It's not about a rejection of you as a person. And that's really important, or else you're gonna walk away from theater.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
in any case, I hear you.
If you are rejected, and you really want to know if it was you or the person who don't fit the role, would it be worthwhile talking to the director to say, I just need for educational purposes, what could I do better next time if that is part of it? I mean,
It's a hard one to answer. One of our founders faced that question. He was music director for one of the early shows. And someone came up to him and said, you know, I don't understand, why didn't I get the role? And he played then audio tape, because we didn't have video, audio tape for her of her audition. And she understood. She did very badly. But is that doing someone a favor? It's a hard call. And are you many times going to get, if, as a director, if I'm asked that, if it's something clearly out of their control, you know, I can say, hey, look, we just had more people, good people audition, than I had parts available. I'm sorry, this was the best way we could do it. If you want that kind of coaching, if you want that kind of insight, you're better off getting a private coach, because that's a person that is going to be able to be more upfront with you, because you're in a teaching situation. When it's your friends having to disappoint your friends, the last thing you want to do is tell them they can't carry a tune in a bucket, you know?
you don't want to put the director on the spot, but
The one thing I would address is that, in general, don't be, if you did reach out, do not take it as any kind of message when the director declines. Because from the auditions, through the casting, blocking and preparing for first rehearsal, and then running rehearsals, that's one of the busiest times for a director. The director, once they cast their show, they have a whole bunch to get ready before their first rehearsal, and they may not have the time to be as kind and polite as you'd like them to be. So be aware that that is a difficult ask of a director.
I think in general, you're better off letting sleeping dogs lie for a while, and then at a party 6 months later, talk about it. Yeah.
So that's what I was going to say, is that it would be a lot easier to answer that question later.
Yes.
I mean, you can even go see the show and see what the person who was cast in that role did with it, and, you know, put it in that perspective. But
And still say to yourself, I could have done it better.
Learn to extrapolate.
yeah, yeah. So I guess that's. I had something else, but it's gone now.
Well, if you think of it quickly, fine. If not, I think we're gonna wrap things up, because we are at the end of the time, and as I said, it
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
break off like
I was
we-
gonna say, it can be a really hard question to answer in a club like this.
My question wasn't so much, why didn't I get the part? My question was, for the future, could you give me a couple of pointers on how I could do it better? That kind of thing, not like, why did I get the part?
Yes.
Unfortunately, those are the same question.
Same question, no. Yeah, again.
You know, it's hard to answer one without answering the other. So I think it's still true that you're better off asking that question after time has let things diffuse a little bit, and then it's much more, what can I do that I can present myself better? Or-
Yeah, so actually, I remembered what I was gonna say. So even before I did theater, with Matt, I do public speaking. And I once had a friend in the audience of a talk that I gave who is an editor of a magazine. That was his job. And when I asked him, so what did you think of the talk I gave? He told me. And I realized that when you ask an editor for feedback,
You're gonna get an
you
answer.
better be prepared for getting feedback. And it was one of the most valuable things in my development in public speaking that I ever did. But gosh, it was hard to listen to
Yeah.
when I
yeah.
was getting it. So that's, and he's still a friend. But I had to kind of tell myself, okay, I asked for this feedback. He would not have told me what he told me if I hadn't asked for it. And it's my job to learn from it and not get angry at getting criticized.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'm sure we could go on for a long time talking, but thank you for listening, and